Coming at you from Bellingham, Washington. This is Two Nuts in a Sack. I'm Julie.
And I'm Gavin.
And tonight we continue our series all about the paranormal with Chapter 6, Aliens and UFOs, Extraterrestrials, Little Green Men, Flying Saucers, All Things Not of This Earth. In 2017, the U.S. government and the Navy admitted that the crafts exist and have been visiting our planet for years. Though the admission of actual physical contact with ET still remains classified. If the ships exist, something has to be flying them. It remains unexplained and therefore paranormal. Sit back, relax, don't panic, don't forget your towel.
That's right. UFOs, or as they're now designated, anomalous aerial vehicles. The U.S. spent over $22 million from 2007 to 2012 investigating reports by servicemen of sightings of these AAVs. Luis Elizondo, a former Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, said that the existence of AAVs, or UFOs, has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. After analysis, these vehicles do not match any conventional aircraft developed on Earth, moving in ways unfathomable by our understanding of aeronautics. No detectable source of propulsion, yet able to move at incredible rates, executing maneuvers impossible without a bending of our understanding of physics. Now, this is going to be an interesting one, because basically I just think that we've had these declassified documents, and I think that I just want to talk about some of the crazy shit that we've seen over the years. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds great, babe.
All right, let's do that, and then we'll close out with some real shockers. What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. The first one starts with John Glenn. February 20th, 1962. So really close to the time, it's 9 days from us, from where we're at now.
Oh, wow.
But back in 1962, on February 20th, John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth. Although 5 minutes after launch, he encounters an anomaly. In his own words, "I never saw anything like it. They're coming by the capsule. They look like little stars, a whole shower of them. Coming by, they swirl around the capsule, and they're brilliantly lighted." He called them the Fireflies, and could never explain what they possibly were.
It's so awesome.
Skeptics kind of went to debunk this one and said that it was just merely ice crystals.
Of course.
But still, the very first man in space sees something really weird happening to his spacecraft. In June of 1965, the Gemini mission, captained by James McDivitt, reported that he saw something out of the window of the capsule. He was able to photograph the object, but mysteriously, quote unquote, mysteriously, the footage he shot disappeared. It was released, what was released of his footage was not, by his own admission, what he saw that day. It's never really explained what he saw because it was unexplainable. In December 16th, 1965, Jim Lovell and Frank Borman of Apollo 13 fame were then on Gemini 7. Lovell, a level-headed, that's way harder to say than you would think it would be, but Lovell, who was a level-headed Navy pilot in his time, reported the sighting of a bogey. When asked to confirm that it was not the booster, Lovell replied simply, "There are several of them, and I also have the booster in sight." And that's just fascinating.
Wow.
Because, I mean, like, they didn't. I mean, if you go back to, like, I always loved the movie The Right Stuff, which was basically about, like, the proceedings of all the
Yes. Yeah.
and these were like the tops of the tops of whatever Navy and Army pilots we had to offer. And so these weren't just like, podunks. These were people that were trained to be the most level headed people in intense situations. So this just like it blows my mind that he's like, yeah, no, I get it. You think that it's the retro booster, but I'm seeing the retro booster, but there are several other things out there that I don't know what the hell they are. And that's just like, I mean, that's just amazing to me. Let's jump ahead to Gemini 11.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
This cold.
I don't think I'll ever get over this fucking cough. I swear to God.
It will leave you at some point. I swear, baby. But thank you for turning away from the mic. That's definitely helpful.
I hope so. I hope it didn't pick it up too much.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely have to go back to the footage on this one. But hey.
All right, continue, please.
We're human beings.
Continue.
So, 1966, Gemini 11. This was the first attempted space docking. They're ultimately going toward the Apollo missions and starting to go toward the world or toward the moon. So they were doing this experiment to see whether or not they could actually dock to spacecraft in space. They were successful in this, by the way. But
excellent.
The crew noticed something bright flying by their craft. Photos were taken. The standing explanation is that it must be some sort of space debris or possibly a Russian satellite. Again, we're kind of starting, these are like the beginnings of the Cold War, so we're super suspicious of anything Russian, or any unexplained thing becomes something Russian. But radar confirmed that the nearest man-made object was over 260 miles away. And upon further analysis from a NASA-employed photo expert, Bruce Maccabee, they were not looking at the Russian Proton 3, which was the satellites that the Russian had sent up most recently and was closest to them.
Right.
They were not looking at the Proton 3 satellite. They were looking at something completely unidentifiable. It had a very weird-looking arm on it that was not present on the satellite.
Huh.
So now we're into the Apollo years. Apollo 11. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and the other guy who unfortunately his name is lost to history. I mean, people know it, but I don't. But Armstrong reported seeing a flashing light that he couldn't explain. Now, he didn't want to keep reporting on this because he didn't want to cause any sort of mass hysteria because of something that could have been anything, but he just had no explanation for it. But Buzz Aldrin later claimed that he had seen this uh, unexplained craft and or vehicle following them through their entire Apollo 11 mission.
Freaky.
Indeed. Buzz Aldrin has not been one to shy away from his belief that we are not alone.
Smart man.
Indeed. Well, I mean, he's just hedging his bets, really. Mission STS-48 was September 15th, 1991. Orbiting over Australia, an object was recorded that could have just been space debris. I've watched this footage an ungodly amount of time, but it looks like a tic tac shaped capsule that's moving and then suddenly and abruptly changes direction. And that's not how things float in space.
Right.
But so this thing suddenly and abruptly changes direction, and then also in the footage, a beam of light is the only way that I can really describe it. Shoots up past the floating tic tac.
Floating tic tac.
Yes.
Sounds delicious.
And it nearly strikes the object, but the object floats away, and you never see anything else of this light anomaly that shot straight up towards it. And it's just really weird because what moves like that in space? I mean, I know that space is a vacuum and things tend to move erratically, but still, like to change direction like that is really something to think about.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Right. You would still have to thrust, use some sort of thrust to move.
Right.
From whatever path that you're on. So it couldn't just be space debris. This brings us to February 26, 1996, SDS-75. They were doing a really nifty experiment. It was basically a tethered generator, and so they were going to have this big. I mean, it looks like just like something straight out of 2001: Space Odyssey. It's this big metal ball that they were going to tether out and try and create electricity by dragging this metal ball through the magnetosphere of the Earth as they orbited. This was going to generate power for the space station, or for their spacecraft, and ultimately when they decided to finally do the ISS, this could be a possible power source that would either be as efficient or more efficient than solar power. Ultimately, they went with solar power, and possibly because of this incident. So they released the big ball satellite thing, and it's on a very large amount of rope, because at its pinnacle, it is stretched about the length of the island of Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so there's 12 miles of tether.
Wow.
And just as they start getting readings from this thing that it actually is doing what it's supposed to, and it's gathering electricity from the magnetosphere as they skirt around the Earth, the tether mysteriously snaps. And they're like, well, shit.
Oh, man.
but the bigger problem is that they're still in orbit with this thing, and
Right.
so because this thing is slowing because it's a big anchor basically going into the magnetosphere, they're gonna come around the planet in their orbital path, and they're gonna strike this thing, and it could really it might hurt the shuttle. So they do a little bit of quick maneuvering and get themselves on a different orbital path.
Evasive maneuvers.
Exactly. And so when they come around the planet, because they're going at like 1700 miles an hour, so it's really goddamn fast. So they come around the planet and they see the tether and this, the generator, but they don't just see that. They also see these craft sort of circling the tether, and they have no explanation for it. It's like we did this thing as an experiment, and then it looks like these other things came to see what we were doing. But it's another thing that's just it's unexplained. It's the paranormal. It's alien.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh my.
So this brings us to December 1st, 1996. It was the longest orbital mission at the time. This was STS-80. As they're circling around the Earth, they come around and they're just about they're circling the Earth, and they look down and they see these lights kind of come up from the Earth's surface, and they align themselves in a circle, and they start flashing, and they don't know what the hell it was. It was just these anomalous objects, these AAVs, and they started either trying to communicate with themselves or trying to communicate with us. But they formed in a circle, and they just start flashing.
Wow.
And I mean, I'm sure that it was something like,
Hey, you stole my line. I did that earlier.
Well, you didn't do it now, so I had to do it because it's
I would have. You told me to be serious. You told me to be serious. You couldn't even let me do. Take me to your leader. I'm doing it.
We'll be serious later. These are just the weird things that have been documented. These are NASA documented case files where it was just weird shit that happened in all of the space missions that we've had since the 60s.
Do you like my alien voice?
Nah, I'm not a huge fan, honestly.
The kids love it.
I know the kids love it, but I'm not a huge fan, honestly.
Well, you suck.
I don't suck. I'm just not a huge fan.
You suck.
Anyhow, September 9th, 2006. This is now STS-196. Space Shuttle Atlantis. As they're entering orbit, they disengage the main fuel tank. It's jettisoned out into space, later to be recovered as it falls back to Earth. But it is tracked on external video, and an AAV is seen crossing the lower right-hand corner of the field of vision. It's a triangular object that remains identified, though debunkers have said that, oh no, it was a reflection off of the glass through which the video was taken. But this is a camera that's designed to take video outside of the ship. So how could, I mean, you would think that they would account for any sort of light anomalies or flashing lights. But that's what I've got. But we're still far from all of the stuff that we have. I mean, we're definitely not going to be able to touch on everything that we've.
Right? No way. There's no way. No way.
I mean, because we barely even touched on Roswell, but everybody knows about Roswell.
Pretty much.
There's just been so much documentation and so many podcasts. So I kind of wanted to, like, I did go into a little deep dive about Bob Lazar and his time at Area 51 or S4, which is a subset of Area 51. But as interesting as it is, it's been covered so many times. Yes, he has been a man that they've tried to erase from history. And by they, I don't know who they are, but
conspiracy.
the only real like evidence of his existence, aside from him actually being a real person, who was interviewed. He was interviewed by Joe Rogan, who just wanted like hell to meet him because I mean he's been a UFO nut for years. But the only like real written existence, like he doesn't even have like he no longer has a birth certificate. He doesn't have a social security number. All of his education from high school on, all the records have been erased.
Huh.
He went to MIT, he went to USC, and all of that has been erased. The only way that they were actually like the only evidence of his existence in the last 60 years has really been paranormal podcasts and a small entry in the phone book that said that Robert Lazar actually exists in New Mexico. But anyhow, that's all like a lot of public record. But of the stuff that I was looking at, his stuff that's a little bit outside. So anyhow, go baby. Please take me out of this.
All right. Well, I'm not nearly as good of a reader or storyteller as you are, Gavin, and I don't know if I can get through this without coughing, but I sure will try.
Fingers crossed.
Richard French, now retired lieutenant colonel, said,
I love this story.
He said, it was a UFO, and there were aliens aboard it. That's what he said. Right, Gavin?
Are we gonna do like an Inception thing, or like a restart at the end, and then go back to the beginning?
That's how it starts. That's what he said. That's what he was saying. I'm just telling you. That's what he said.
Okay. Well, where does this come from then?
I don't know.
Well, okay. I mean, I know it was the Huffington Post.
I'm just telling you.
And that was like his
Huffington
cry
Post.
of victory. But like, where's the backstory?
Well, I'm gonna read it to you. When Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was an alleged lead investigator of Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book. That's something we could have gotten into, but we're not gonna. But it was I'll just do a brief overview. Like, Project Blue Book was the official government inquiry into the existence of extraterrestrials. Like, this was the, if you read the Stephen King novel, Dreamcatcher, they called it Project Blue Boy. But that was basically sort of the basis of this, where they were the clandestine government agency that investigates all any and all UFO incidents. But there's a lot of really nifty stuff out there, listeners. So give it a peek.
Anyways, so
Sorry.
Project Blue Book in the 1950s, his job was to shoot down false reports of UFOs. Given his job, French never dreamed he'd end up in Newfoundland. Oh my gosh.
I'll just say it.
You'll say it for me. Thank you.
Newfoundland.
Thank you. One day, watching what appeared to him to be two extraterrestrial performing repairs on a submerged unknown circular craft. In Washington, D.C., recently, the 83-year-old retired officer testified at the citizen hearing on disclosure panel of 6 former members of Congress about his work as a UFO debunker in 1952.
So he was like the Dana Scully,
basically.
Who was just like, no, this has to be wrong, and they were like, hey, you got good instincts. Go and prove all this shit wrong, or at least figure out how to prove all this shit wrong. And he did his best.
French recounted how the Newfoundland, please pronounce, Gavin.
Newfoundland.
Incident unfolded decades ago in the early 1950s after 2 UFOs were seen by many people off the coast of St. John's. French's... Shut up. There's no Newfoundland, Newfoundland, whateverland.
That's where St. John's is. Sorry, I think it's kind of funny because I've gone through like so many pronunciation guides that like, so I'm just gonna do what they do when you click on it on YouTube, and I'm just gonna be like Newfoundland.
No, I say
Newfoundland.
Like Newfoundland. Newfoundland.
It's not Finland. It's not Newfoundland.
Newfoundland.
It's Newfoundland.
Whatever. French's superiors ordered him to look into the situation. They said, we have a UFO report and we want you to investigate it. And that was standard for what I was doing, French told the Huffington Post. They told me there were 2 of them involved and that they were deep under the water. After entering the water during roughly 100 miles an hour. That's pretty fast.
Yeah, that's like slamming into the water. And it didn't seem to faze any of these craft.
Well, there were a lot of people assembled on the wharf, at least 100 standing around, just looking in amazement at the water, including several local policemen.
So there's a lot of corroborating evidence to suggest that this is actually a thing. I mean, aside from this professional debunker just standing agawk as this thing happens.
French recalls the water being very clear, and he could see two circular crafts, each one about 18 feet in diameter and approximately 3 feet thick. He said the 2 objects were floating below the surface of the water, a couple of feet apart, not more than 20 feet from the shore, and he saw 2 beings in the water near the ships. The first thing I saw was the UFOs, and it was apparent to me that they were doing something to the craft. And I couldn't really tell what it was because they were on the bottom side of the, and not visible to me except when they would occasionally look over to the side where I could see them. The water was fairly clear and I could see without having trouble. They weren't down at the bottom of the seabed. They were about halfway down.
It sounds a little bit like a repair job or something.
Sorry, that was wordy. That was a little tough.
I know. You got a little verbose there. But,
sorry.
I mean, ultimately you were quoting a guy, but still, this sounds like somebody had a little breakdown by the side of the road, aka the ocean, because they didn't want to be seen, but then they were seen by hundreds of people.
Well, French told the Huffington Post that the two beings he saw were about 2 or 3 feet tall, light gray in color, very thin, long arms with either 2 or 3 fingers. The top of their jawline, their eyes were very slanted, and you couldn't see pupils in them. They looked the way aliens have been depicted in motion pictures.
Yeah, these are those classic grays. Like the really skinny aliens with the gigantic heads and the black eyes, which is always just creepy to me, anyway.
Right. Yes, very freaky. As the Air Force UFO debunker watched he claims one of the ships began to rise out of the water. When it hit the surface, it was going about 100 miles per hour. It then accelerated to somewhere in the neighborhood at 2,500 to 3,000 miles an hour and disappeared.
Blink of an eye.
Yeah, it disappeared. It returns about 20 minutes later. I can read, I swear. Slowed down to nearly a stop before it entered the water. Then went down, and the two beings worked together.
Just a small little test drive.
It took them about 20 minutes, and then the two ships departed together again, slow when they exited the water, and immediately they sped up to a very high speed. I believe they were repairing the ship and tested the repairs. They had been adequate, and then away they went.
Yeah, so that's French. French talking, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Ironically, French's job at the time as a Project Blue Book investigator was to debunk UFOs. So what kind of report did he file with Blue Book about this case he had personally witnessed? Needless to say, it was a fictitious report, as all of the texts were. I didn't really say that they were UFOs. I said that they were something we didn't know. Some type of foreign or unrecognizable vehicle there. In other words, I weasel worded it.
Right. I mean, he was a debunker. So if he had like just been like, yeah, dude, UFOs, they'd have been like, no. Your job is to prove that these things don't exist. And he's just like, yeah. So this is just something we don't know about. And everybody seemed to be just fine with this, I guess.
And he says, oh, I think without a doubt it was a UFO. And I think there was aliens aboard it. There's no question in my mind that was exactly what it was. And my duty was to debunk it, the story. So I did my best to do so. The events of the Newfoundland UFO and alleged aliens took place some 60 years ago, in the days before everyone had a digital camera or image capture cell phone in their pockets. Despite in fact that there are no photographs to substantiate the report, it still is an amazing story.
Right, like this dude is either just like batshit crazy, but I mean it's one of those things where it's like I really want to like track down. I mean, I know we're not there yet, but I really want to track down some of these like old government officials and just be like, hey, what the hell happened? I mean, I want to be like Bill Clinton when he was getting into office. He said that he wanted to know two things. He wanted to know whether or not aliens existed and who shot JFK.
Right.
And he's like, I'm the president, I should know these things. But even when I was going and when we were doing research on this, it basically just came down to when it comes to UFOs and the investigation thereof, they've done such a good job of compartmentalization. So it's like as Bob Lazar said, they simply gave you a piece of the ship, and they wanted you to back engineer that piece of the ship, but they rarely let you see any of the other components that this piece went into, because they had other teams of scientists that were working on it. And so through this compartmentalization, nobody ever really gets the full picture except for like a select few.
Right.
And so like that's why this has been just like so it makes it so mysterious, because they like nobody knows the whole truth. And maybe somebody does, but that dude is definitely not gonna ever like give a Huffington Post interview or go on Joe Rogan or do anything of that nature.
And I apologize for my bad reading. It was terrible.
It's okay. It was a good story. I really like that story. It's fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
I have another story.
Oh, good. Let's hear your story. You should do all the reading. Swear to God.
Okay. So this will just let's use this story, and this will help take us out of this ever deep topic and ever so shrouded in mystery. But we'll just dip another toe as we leave. And I'm going to talk to you about the Rendlesham Forest incident. So this took place outside of the Woodbridge Airfield in Suffolk, England. In late December 1980, a series of reported sightings of unexplained lights and, more importantly, claims of a UFO landing. At the time, the United States Air Force was using the Woodbridge Airfield and its facilities as a base of operations in England. Personnel, including the base's deputy commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles I. Holt, were amongst those whom reported on the incident. It's one of the best known and documented sightings. It has come to be called Britain's Roswell. The UK's Ministry of Defence has officially recognized the event, but considered it posed no seeming threat to national security. They decided not to investigate any further as a security matter. Skeptics have tried to explain away the sightings as a fireball from a downed aircraft or simply light from a nearby this is like it. Orford Ness Lighthouse. Like Ness is. It's hard to fucking say this word. God damn it. Orford Ness.
You're still doing better than me.
Well, I'm trying real goddamn hard. So.
I thought I was the one with the cough.
Hey. The thing that makes this case stand out is that it's widely reported, but it's all military. These aren't your average yokels reporting on strange lights and possible landing of an anomalous aerial vehicles. These are ranked and trained U.S. soldiers.
Wow.
So, on the 26th of December 1980, about 3 a.m., a security detail saw lights descending into the Rendlesham Forest, near the east gate of the Woodbridge Airfield. Skeptics and some astronomers have attributed this light show to a piece of natural debris burning up over southern England. At just distracted me.
I'm sorry. Sorry, my bad.
It's okay. I'm aware of the time code, but you gotta quit reminding me about it because you're just throwing up fingers, and I'm just trying to figure out what
Just
you're
letting
saying.
you know.
I know, I appreciate it, but I feel like now I'm on like a time
I was doing
clock.
it quietly just to signal you, like, hey, this is where we're at.
I know, but now I feel like I'm on a time clock.
You're not on a time clock. There's no time limit. I'm just letting you know the time.
I know, I just got horrible flashes to when I was in debate class, and they would be like, you only have 2 minutes left. And they'd like flash a little red light. Anyhow. So, astronomers have attributed the light show to a piece of natural debris burning up over southern England at the time. But the servicemen on the ground weren't aware of these armchair quarterbacks' analysis. To them, it looked like a downed aircraft. The soldiers entered the forest to investigate, and they came upon a glowing metallic object.
Oh, wow.
With colored lights.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. Sergeant Jim Peniston, which, sorry, I tried to gloss over his name like so many times. But Peniston claims they had encountered a craft of unknown origin.
Excuse me.
And it even Peniston even claimed that he touched the craft, and despite the frigid temperature of the air, the craft was warm to the touch. Shortly after 4 a.m., local police were called to the area by a stream of phone calls from the residents near the supposed landing site. The policemen reported that the only lights they were able to see were those of the Orford Ness lighthouse, keeping its vigil over the sea, but miles away from the supposed landing site. As day broke, several servicemen returned to the clearing where Peniston and his compatriot had investigated in the wee small hours of the morning. They found 3 small impressions on the ground in a triangular shape, along with burn marks and broken branches on the surrounding trees. At 10:30, the local police were again summoned, this time to investigate impressions in the ground which they thought could have been made by an animal, but none they had ever seen before. Were there extraterrestrials? I don't know. Early in the morning of December 28th, Lieutenant Colonel Halt returned with a small detachment of soldiers. They confirmed all reports that had been made by Peniston and his cohort using a Geiger counter. Using a Geiger counter, they found background radiation around the site was twice that of the surrounding areas, though they did detect a small burst about a half mile from the landing site. Halt recorded his expedition on a microcassette recorder. I listened to this tape, and he seemed coherent and rational, though a little bit bewildered by what he was seeing. As the investigation was coming to a close, a light was seen flashing across the field to the east. Skeptics cite this as the light from the Orford Ness lighthouse. But again, these soldiers were aware of the lighthouse and its location in reference to where they were, and it just didn't add up. After that, Halt and his men saw 3 star-like lights in the sky, approximately 10 degrees above the horizon, ever so often beaming a stream of light. The brightest of these three objects hovered for 2 to 3 hours, well outside any operational parameters of any aerial vehicle that we have on this Earth. 2 weeks later, Lieutenant Colonel Holt sent a memorandum to the Ministry of Defense, and thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, I'll read you a text of this memo. There have been redactions made, but this is the memo as I've found it on multiple sites.
We can't pause.
Sorry, I had to grab my phone. Early in the morning of December 27th, 1980, approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 USAF security police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate of the RAF Woodbridge. That's the Royal Air Force, RAF. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or have been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed 3 patrolmen to proceed on foot. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base, and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with white light. The object itself had a pulsing red light on top and a bank of blue lights underneath. The object was hovering or on legs. As the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately an hour later near the back gate. The next day, 3 depressions, 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter, were found where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night, the area was checked for radiation. Beta/gamma readings of 0.1 millirentgens were reported, with peak readings in the 3 depressions and near the center of the triangle formed by the depressions. A nearby tree had moderate 0.05 to 0.07 millirentgens readings on the side of the tree toward the depression. So basically, it's like wherever the trees faced, they had radiation signatures upon them. Later in the night, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles, then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed, all of which were about 10 degrees off the horizon. The objects moved rapidly in sharp, angular movements, and displayed red, green, and blue lights. The objects to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8-12 power lens. They then turned to full circles. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. The object to the south was visible for 2 to 3 hours and beamed a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned witnesses, witnessed the activity in paragraphs 2 and 3. Signed, Charles I. Holt, Lieutenant Colonel, USAF, Deputy Base Commander. So that was his own account of what happened. It was put in 2 weeks after the event happened, but still really pretty crazy. He was just trying to wrap his head around what was going on in the Rendlesham Forest, which just boggles my mind. But it should also be noted that Woodbridge was a nuclear-capable facility, meaning that in the height of the Cold War, there was enough nuclear warheads on site that could literally destroy the Earth. So maybe that's why they were there. And maybe there was some sort of communication because the British government never recognized this alien investigation, if you will, as a national threat. It's a weird, wild, wonderful universe that we live in. It's full of mystery. And try as they might, governments the world around have tried to stifle the reports of sightings and investigations of things not of this earth. Slowly but surely, even the debunkers are being debunked. The U.S. government has relented and admitted the existence of alien aircraft. Trump, as much as we hate him, Trump has he's commissioned.
Get it together, man. Get it together.
I'm sorry. The idea of this still just makes me crack up. But we have a new branch of the military coming soon. The Space Force.
Space Force.
Now maybe it's just
not X-Force, but it's Space Force. I still want to give my arms an X and be like, Space Force.
Wakanda forever. Now maybe it's just a publicity stunt, and maybe they're all just hoaxes. But of the myriad stories and reports of abductions and sightings, only one has to be genuine to make you realize that in the vast expanse of the universe, we may not be alone. And if that ain't a kick in the sack, I don't know what is.
All right, this is Two Nuts in the Sack, signing off.